Hello, my lovelies. I am Madam Crystal Butterfly, and today I will be reviewing Cinders Necessary Evil by Sky Sommers. Now, my lovelies, before I get into what exactly this lovely book is all about, let's have a little chit-chat about the author. Sky has been writing since she was 12. At the timing of the making this video, she has been a published author for about 10 years. When it comes to what pushed her to want to be involved in the world of the author, well, when she hears someone else's story, has a dream, or is just going for a walk, inspiration for a story dances into her mind. Naturally, she has to tell the story by putting it in a book. Sky has always loved the tale of Cinderella, and her story Cinders in a small way relates to her own life via the fact that Sky is a stepmother. Her husband has 4 kids from his previous marriage and they have 1 child together. She wanted to turn the step-parent stereotype of being evil on its head in her story. Also playing a role in the inspiration for Cinders is Sky's fascination with the holes in fairy tales. Like, why were the slippers only able to fit Cinderella's feet? Or where was the fairy godmother before she showed up to send Cinderella to the ball? Something interesting Sky mentioned is her mind lets her hear her characters speak to her, demanding their own books, scenes, and plot twists, granting her more ideas for stories. Her experience with publishing her books has been mixed, since every book is different and is received differently. She mentioned how developmental editor friends, beta readers, and ARC readers are a huge help in ironing out the kinks, which decreases the fear of a story not being received well. However, when it came to publishing Cinders, the difficulty Sky faced was a little more complicated than getting story feedback. As a stepmother, Sky was worried about her readers assuming that the story was a copy and paste from her life. She also worried that since she discussed teen sex and teen pregnancy, she feared people would not want to read this story. Personally, I am very grateful that these topics were included in Cinders because these things happen in real life, and these are also subject matter that really needs to be discussed and not hidden away just because it makes some people uncomfortable. Now, what does Sky like about books so darn much? Simple. Books create an alternate universe that let people lose themselves in it, which is always such an amazing thrill. Alright, now, what exactly is this Cinders story even about? Oh, you think you know Cinderella? She loses a shoe and in exchange gets a prince? Here's a double book that tells all. The Stepmother's Tale versus Ella's Diary of Events. The stepmother's view is that she has 3 step kids with magic abilities and a license to be evil. Yes, please. With a restaurant to run, Ella to boss around, and a cannibalistic witch to befriend, Grace seems to have made the bargain of a lifetime. If it wasn't for one estranged husband, the lying mirrors, and Ella's teen romances getting completely out of hand. Also, there seems to be part of the bargain Grace might be forgetting while her son's 3rd birthday is approaching fast. Ella, on the other hand, used to love fairy tales until she was in one, thanks to her mother for upping and leaving to chase after some man. Now she's stuck with her stepmother and absentee father. Ella do this and Ella do that. She wishes her Aunt Melly, her godmother, would whisk her away from the drudgery of her common existence. She can't wait to turn 18, finish school, and leave this place. Melly insists she needs to marry an aristo, but Ella wants to just figure out what she can do, who she can be, where she could live, because it definitely isn't doing chores, serving dinner to her stepmother's clients, and living in this hovel they normally call a castle. She wishes for a miracle. Can Grace be the necessary evil that gets Ella her dream? What did she get in the bargain? And why are guardian angels and the Fae Queen involved again? Let's take a moment to focus in on a couple of this story's characters, starting with that wicked stepmother. I love how the author wrote her character Grace. Grace and her family live in the Magic Kingdom ruled by Beauty and the Beast. She takes care of her son Henry and her 3 stepkids, the twins Hansel and Greta, along with the oldest Ella. Dear stepmama just loves doing horrible things like making her stepchildren help her out in the restaurant instead of hiring staff to help her instead. Also, the household can have money to send Ella to school and later send Hansel and Greta to school. In addition to making it so that the household can have money for extra necessary items. Worse, she's always picking on poor Ella. Grace likes to do mean things like not let poor Ella be in her room with a boy without leaving the door open. She even had the nerve to tell Ella to do the dishes and the laundry. All jokes aside, Grace does care a lot more than she's willing to admit about her stepkids, especially Ella. Some of the reasons why Grace gets viewed as the bad guy is the witch who attempted to eat Hansel and Greta is allowed to dine in stepmama's restaurant, but she only lets the witch come to eat when Hansel and Greta are not at home. She also struck a deal with Miss Witch where the witch has to stick to an all-vegetarian diet. Otherwise, Grace will not allow her into her restaurant ever again. There is more to the witch than I am telling. If you wish to find out what it is, then I suggest you grab a copy of this story. I also want to mention that Cinders is the first story in Sky's Magic Mirror saga. After you read the first book, you might want to take a look at the other stories. Heaven knows I've already started reading part 2. Anyway, back to Grace. She does have a complicated relationship with Ella. Ella and Grace butt heads a lot, mostly because Ella is driving Grace crazy. It's a nightmare to get Ella to do chores. Ella tries to undermine Grace, and she doesn't seem grateful for anything Grace does for her, even when Grace saves her from some perverted aristocrat. But Grace even goes so far as to paint herself as the wicked stepmother. It's in response, usually to something Ella did. As for the other children, Grace tends to have an easier time with them, especially Greta, who is Grace's #1 helper in the restaurant. Alright, I'm going to use Grace's relationship with Hansel to talk a little bit about her problems with Miss Fairy Godmother. Grace and Melly tend to work like thick crude oil and water, aka Grace often seems to be fighting the urge to slap Melly. When Grace and her husband went to Melly to demand that she give them his children, Melly was understandably skeptical, but was more than willing to immediately send Ella over before eventually throwing Ella out, followed by sending the twins over on and off to stay with Grace and her husband. To make matters more complicated, Melly has a horrible habit of giving Ella bad advice when it comes to getting a man and life goals. She and Grace even butt heads because Melly just decides one day that Hansel is no longer allowed to play with his toys. Grace doesn't like this because Hansel's still a kid, and she figures he should be allowed to play with his toys and give them up when he hits a phase in his life when he's ready not to play with toys anymore. But Melly puts her foot down, and there really isn't much Grace can do about it after that. There are a lot more issues Grace has with the godmother, but if you wish to know more about that, then like I said, you're gonna have to read this book for yourself. Poor Grace is also having issues with her husband. Partly because he's gone a lot because of work. And when he's home, there are times when he just completely ignores her loneliness, and she questions if he's found somebody else and has lost all interest in her. Now, I can't go deeper into this via the fact that if I talk about it too much, then the review will no longer be spoiler-free, and then you won't read this book. And I have no desire for you to miss out on an interesting read, so you may want to grab a copy of this book. Anyway, my lovelies, let's take a moment to focus on this story's version of the heroine, Cinderella. When it comes to Ella, her fairy godmother is pushing her to marry. Her stepmother is harassing her about chores. Meanwhile, a girl at school named Betty is determined to make Ella's school life a living nightmare. Ella needs to figure out what's best for Ella, but figuring that out is something she's having a hard time doing. When you read Ella's diary, which the author based off of her own diary, you're presented with an all-new look at events that took place in the story. I can't say more about the diary to keep the review spoiler-free, but I did love how this was done in a way that did not feel like a word-for-word rehash of what I read in the first part of the story, creating a fun new experience. It's time to give this story its butterfly rating. So, when it comes to Cinders Necessary Evil, I will be giving this story the rating of 5 butterflies out of 5. This book was just too much of a fun read. I was just so enraptured by its tale that I had to keep reading and reading and had a very hard time putting it down. So I'm telling you right now, my lovelies, if you don't get yourself a copy of this book, then you are definitely not doing yourself any favors. Now, my lovelies, if you've made it to this part of the video, I would like to say thank you, and please give this video a like, leave me a little comment, and if you have not yet, smack that subscribe button like it owes you money, and don't forget to give that little notification bell a ring. And with that, my lovelies, this video is a wrap. Now, if you please, come with me as we dance into a world of magic.